Welcome back. You are just in time to catch up with the latest from the business world here on KTN Business Today. My name is Abi Agina, and let's start off the program by looking at our Twitter poll question for this day as the World Economic Forum continues in Rwanda in Kigali. Well, our question today is, what excels as a continent that shouldn't be left out at the World Economic Forum on Africa? That's our Twitter poll question, and we're asking you, what excels as a continent that shouldn't be left out at the World Economic Forum on Africa? Well, this forum kicked off yesterday, and it's going on till the end of the week. A lot of discussions among African leaders expected. We do have President Kenyatta attending this particular forum, among other dignitaries from across the levels of government. So that is our question today, and do tweet us at KT News or my Twitter handle at Agina Abi. Just give us your feedback regarding what you think that needs to be addressed when it comes to, as a continent, what should be addressed. Well, let's kick off with that. Well, the 26th edition of the World Economic Forum kicked off on Wednesday in Kigali, Rwanda's capital, bringing together leaders from around the world, among them President Uhuru Kenyatta. The three-day forum is anchored on the theme connecting Africa's resources through digital transformation, and it is expected to prompt dialogue among business leaders on breaking the barriers to trade and economic growth in Africa, among African countries and the rest of the world. Joining us now via phone, well, he'll actually be joining us later on, but let's bring you more stories from that particular forum. Well, still at the World Economic Forum, President Uhuru Kenyatta says the continent needs to capitalize on one of its biggest resources being the youth. Investing in the youth does not only apply to education, but equipping the youth with skills. Let's listen in on that.
Churning out people from our schools. We are churning out people from our universities. But are we churning out that which the job market requires? We in Kenya are beginning to relook at our curriculum, to ask ourselves, is our curriculum tailored to the needs of the world today to create opportunities for our young people? So we are beginning to look at that. We are beginning once again, as Tony has said, to reinvest in technical training as well, because this is where we are seeing the skill shortages, and trying to see how we can match the skill shortage in the market. We cannot talk about intra-Africa trade if we do not have intra-Africa connectivity. And we in East Africa are really, really working very, very hard in that particular direction. I think for the first time since independence, by the end of this year, beginning of next year, we will be connected to Ethiopia, which again will enable a smoothen trade between Kenya and Ethiopia. We're working on integrating our various road sectors within the East African community, as well as power connectivity, so that we can share power also across borders. So these are some of the initiatives that we are working on, together with removing all these NTBs that have been barriers to smooth trade across our borders.
Well, still keeping it with matters, World Economic Forum, Africa spends $35 billion on food importation, yet the continent should become a global powerhouse in food and agriculture. This is among talks ongoing at the World Economic Forum in Kigali, Rwanda, seeking a mind shift from business leaders to channel efforts in being the drivers of growth rather than outsource growth outside the continent.
$35 billion importing food in Africa. And if we do nothing, a do-nothing scenario, by 2025, that is going to rise to $110 billion US. Now, I can understand that if we have no land. I can understand we have no cheap labor. I can understand we have no great sunshine. I can understand if you don't have big amount of rivers. But we have everything. Almost everything in Africa today, you throw it up before it hits the ground, it can grow. And Africa, in my view, should become a global powerhouse in food and agriculture. And to become that, it means that we have to unlock our potential. We can't eat it. There's no market for it. So we've got to really unlock it. And I think to do that requires exactly changing our perspective on agriculture. I was former Minister of Agriculture in Nigeria, so I carry agricultural genes in me even as president of the African Development Bank. The way we've got to do that is first to change our mindset on agriculture. Agriculture is not a way of life. It's not a social sector. It's not a giveaway sector. Agriculture is a business. And we must understand it's a business that works for the large, for the medium, and for the small. And so this whole notion that agriculture should be treated as a development program, which will bury it, it really makes absolutely no sense.
Indeed, thought-provoking sentiments there coming out of the World Economic Forum. We here at KTN News will continue to update you on the latest from that end. Well, let's come closer home now. Audit firm PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, has called for increased absorption of the expanded budget for the public to benefit through its pre-budget analysis ahead of the national budget statement set for next month. The firm noted that despite the budget rising over the years, there has been a sharp drop in absorption of development budgets.
Kenya has in the last 3 years ramped up its spending to build a modern railway line, new roads and electricity plants, driving up the budget deficit and unnerving investors. But according to a pre-budget report by audit firm PricewaterhouseCoopers, absorption of development funds in other sectors is still wanting.
We note that in the past there has been a delay in the budget absorption. In other words, once a budget is published and is being implemented, not the entire amounts budgeted are being absorbed.
According to the report from the Controller of Budget, Exchequer releases towards development during the first half of the financial year 2015-2016 was 110.4 billion shillings, representing 14.3% of the annual net estimates. This is a low percentage considering that at half year, total Exchequer releases towards development expenditure should be about 50% of the annual net estimates.
Of significant growth, we noted construction. As you're aware, there are several construction activities taking place in line with the government's objective on infrastructure. The standard gauge railways in particular has employed quite a number of people and therefore drove that growth in construction.
On debt levels on the analysis, the PwC also noted that the split between recurrent and development expenditure has not been good to spur growth. The firm observed that even in the 2016-2017 budget estimates, development and recurrent expenditure have been estimated at almost similar levels.
Kenya's economy grew by 5.6% in 2015. This lagged behind Tanzania, that was at 6.9%, Rwanda 6.5%, but was above Uganda, that was at 5.2%.
Excessive expenditure is worrying, as every Kenyan owes the world 79,000 shillings, thanks to the government borrowing. PwC adds that even though the country is still within the debt threshold, the public should question more on the quality of borrowing and its utilization. If most of the borrowing is used in funding recurrent expenditure, development will slow and eventually pose repayment crisis. Philip Keitany, KTN Business.
Well, of course, we continue to keep our eyes on the issues around the budget. Kenya having a budget of about 2.3 trillion shillings. How big will be the fiscal deficit in this particular budget? It is a question that we will be putting to the Ministry of Treasury to get more answers from. Well, how safe is your water? The Kenya Bureau of Standards has suspended 369 water bottling farms permits for failure to meet the laid out standards of using the KEBS mark of quality on their products. Non-compliance to requirements of the relevant water standards such as the Code of Hygiene, using suspect sources of water, poor and misleading labeling were also among consideration for permit suspension. This suspension comes in the wake of complaints from consumers on the quality of bottled water which has been in the market.
announced the suspension of licenses for about 369 companies. What this actually means is that they are supposed to stop selling the water to the public until they come for recertification. We are not kicking them out of the business. What we are basically saying is that today they are not meeting our standards. We want to work with them to make sure that they meet the Kenya standards, recognizing the fact that a number of them have put in heavy capital investments in their businesses, and therefore we have suspended their operations, the 369. Those licenses will be reinstated as soon as they meet all the requirements for bottling water. And those are not just KEBS requirements. There are other regulatory agencies that have an interest in food, in the food sector, the Public Health Department, for example, and the rest. So the recertification process will require that they go through full certification.
Well, out of the 399 companies, Kenya has about 600 bottling companies that deal with the water. Quite timely development there. Technology firm Copycat Group is considering a proposal to list on the Nairobi Securities Exchange to spread ownership to other Kenyans. The company's board will be sitting to deliberate on the issue, which was raised by ICT Cabinet Secretary Joe Musheru during Copycat Group 30th anniversary celebrations. The CS noted that ICT companies are growing fast and transforming Kenya's economy and should thus spread ownership to the public, and that the management should give Kenyans a chance to share in the success of the company, which started operations in 1985 as an office machines vendor but has transformed into a fully fledged ICT company providing both hardware and software solutions. ICT companies are primed for growth, with studies showing that 70% of the skills that will be required in the labor market will be technology-based. Now to matters to do with risk. Treasury Principal Secretary Dr. Kamau Thuge has challenged private companies to develop proper risk management controls in the day-to-day running of their organizations to avoid companies plunging into financial distress. This comes months after the anti-bribery bill was assented to by the President. With the fast-growing population, Kenya has seen a sharp rise in demand for goods and services. With a growth rate of about 5.6%, the country's economy is poised for major takeoff once investments in infrastructure start to pay off. But the stumbling block to Kenya's accelerated growth is corruption.
The government of Kenya has put in place initiatives that would spur boards and senior management to see value in pursuing good corporate governance and risk management practices.
It is mandatory for all our public entities to have an internal auditing agency. The Act was put in place to strengthen that auditing function. We now want to extend the same to the private sector. Internal audit departments in the public sector have grown from strength to strength, but still face challenges relating to budget, equipment, staffing, and job segregation with the other management services. The draft internal auditing bill, drafted in consultation with the Institute of Internal Auditors Kenya chapter, will go a long way in tackling some of these shortcomings and challenges. I ask the National Treasury, represented by our Principal Secretary here, to act on this bill and put in place the critical legislation for the internal audit function in both the public and the private sector. A recent survey by Transparency International ranked Kenya position 139 out of 168 countries. Weak ethics coupled with poor corporate governance practices remains a key challenge. That we have what it takes to change the fortunes of our continent and our people. And it is our responsibility, first and foremost. We can only ask for help from others. but the primary responsibility is ours. And we must seize that responsibility and do what we must to ensure that the opportunity that presents itself does not slip away.
Lack of proper structures and inaction on rogue managers has set a precedent of total abuse of office. This will no longer be the case, according to the Deputy President.
It boils down to the democratization of our economies and to ensuring that professionals like yourself carry out their responsibilities and ensure that we keep out those who want to mismanage or misuse or steal resources that are meant for the growth of our continent and for the benefit of the people of this continent.
A majority of companies have paid little attention to risk management, which exposes firms to mismanagement, which in some cases have ended up being disastrous.
Corporate challenges like Enron and those that led to the financial crisis in 2008 underline the far-reaching repercussions of today's highly integrated global economy. In Africa, the economic weight of such activities is much more severe than in California or, for example, in London. In Kenya, we have experienced this with troubled financial institutions. Africa is not in a position to be losing jobs or watching the hard-earned savings of families go down to waste. Whereas over the years, developed countries have painstakingly built up reputations of stable, transparent, and open international hubs for doing business, Africa needs to strengthen corporate governance.
Abi Agina, KTN Business Today. Well, from that report, we want to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, we'll be telling you about the Internal Auditors Conference. I got an exclusive interview with the President of International Institute of Internal Auditors, and we'll also be giving you an update on how the money markets as well as the stock markets are looking like on this Thursday of May. All this after this commercial break.